welcome all to a spooky edition of the E-Politeia. It's very spooky. We have Vathek, spookiest man on our side of Twitter, pretty easily.
Again, spookiest man on period.
On Twitter, period. I don't know. There are some pretty spooky autogenophiles. They're at least spooky to look at. It's really Heliotrophy, not the spookiest, but
that's true, unfortunately.
But certainly capable of talking some Chthonic, which is appropriate because we are talking Chthonic today on the E-Politeia.
For Samhain, the most poorly spelled holiday of all.
Just like everything else that's Celtic.
Tragically.
It's pretty up there. Anyway, so in honor of this day of liminal thinness of the liminal, we're talking about death. Specifically, the Chthonic deities, to whom many don't really talk about because it's a little bit spooky. It's a little bit, as you say, too much for some people.
Yeah, it's also sometimes tough to find the boundary. It seems to vary a lot between systems of as far as who is, what gods are restricted to functions about death, or could be considered holy Chthonic, versus gods that are, maybe mostly about something else, but also come up in conversations about death or the afterlife.
Yeah.
Speaking from
Huh?
Seems like some.
You're cutting in and out, man. Seems we are having some technical difficulties.
Egyptian.
We're getting little bits and pieces of it here.
Yeah, we're only hearing very small fragments of what you're saying.
If you would like to donate some money to get Vathek a better mic, please do so at nothing. We don't have a donation link set up, but
you can send thoughts and prayers. They're free.
They are free.
If you'd like to.
Send thoughts and prayers that Vathek finds one that fell off a truck or something.
Yeah. You could also type what you were going to say, and one of us can relay it.
So, anyway, in the meantime...
Am I coming through back?
A little bit better. Here. Alright, so...
Okay. We're gonna...
Oh no.
Oh.
I'm on the edge of my seat. The edge of my seat.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in the meantime, while we wait for him to fix that, I have made a new brand account, or whatever it's called, on YouTube, specifically for the E-Politeia, because I would like for the rest of us to be able to hold this without having to have me here.
Yeah, certainly.
In addition to being able to upload just videos on our own. So, next time it will not be held on my account, but it will be held on that account, which is conveniently called E-Politeia. The E-Politeia?
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. But that will be next time, which will be next time.
Very true. Any progress, Vathek?
Luckily for us, it says we have 0 viewers, so we're not really taking up anyone's trouble. I guess everyone's out on Halloween.
That's true. It is only, 5 here. Festivities haven't really started, at least in my neck of the woods. But, Chthonic deities.
Yeah, chthonic. So, I think there needs to be like a somewhat of an understanding of a distinction in regards to the chthonic. You've got
Yes.
chthonic, and then specifically death-related chthonic. I think that's an important distinction to be made. Like, there should obviously be understood that there's a difference between dread Persephone and, say, Heracles, who is merely a demigod that is dead.
Yes.
It's an important distinction to be made, for sure. But also, even within that, there's like a deity who is associated with death, and one who is very corely to do with death, like Zagreus.
Right.
Zagreus is almost more chthonic than Hades in some regards.
Yeah. Hades doesn't experience being killed like Zagreus does.
Yes. Zagreus is probably the most interesting of Zagreus and all the various tendrils of Zagreus around there, like Zelmoxis, are very interesting in that it is the singular god that experienced death, so to speak, which I suppose likely inspired the Jesus myth.
Yes.
Wasting no time.
Huh?
We caught wasting no time.
Yeah, I was saying we're wasting no time with the actual things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You could argue Heracles experienced death as well, although that could be a little fuzzy, I suppose, since he was. I believe most would say he was apotheosized into Olympus rather than into Hades. Although there is also the account that his shade is in Hades, just sort of an echo of him chilling there.
It wasn't Heracles that really lived and died, but the image of Heracles. That Heracles was always a god. To take from the parlance of the Egyptians in that regard, that there is no such thing as a thing, that nobody becomes a deity. They always were, but it was a realization by us, mere mortals, that they were a god when their flesh self died.
And possibly also a realization by their flesh self happening at some point during its life. Not necessarily.
It's like
not necessarily knowing from the start.
Alexander was always a god. He never became one. And he realized this later in life.
With the oracle at the oasis.
Was the oracle
Siwa, I believe it was Siwa.
It was Ammon Zeus. It said that he was the son of Ammon Zeus. Though, as we say, we think it was Dionysius.
If we're going to talk about chthonic things, that's a great segue to Serapis, which seems to...
Serapis is also a very chthonic god.
Yeah, his worship seems to emerge around the time Alexander started Hellenizing Egypt, although it's not entirely clear. There may have been a a figure with that name before the Greeks arrived. The etymology seems kind of fuzzy because there's some indication that Serapis as a word is a compound of pre-existing Egyptian words. It doesn't necessarily require Greek input.
Yeah, it's like Worcestershire ship or something like that.
Repeat that.
It's WSJRHP because we can't just add consonants to Egyptian willy-nilly. Can't make that easy.
Same problem as Celtic.
Well, Celtic always had. People still speak that language, though. Yeah, you don't see people going around speaking Demotic. That would be pretty cool, though, if we could find people just speaking Demonic, like it was normal. I curse the name of the Arabs for destroying the Egyptian language.
Well, how close is Coptic to Demotic?
It is descent, clearly descended. That is a known fact. That's what helped people translate it, because they could figure out roughly what sorts of sounds would be there. But for some reason, people just refuse to add consonants when writing about ancient Egyptian language, which is just weird.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Anyway, Serapis.
Very chthonic god.
Yeah, a really interesting mixture of chthonic and solar, which is something that I think a certain Twitter demographic can't understand. They see these two things as like extremely opposed.
It must be solar, or it must be chthonic. Not understanding. This is fundamentally like a problem, right? With a lot of the sphere, so to speak, is that they will say they understand monism. They will say that they have understood non-dualism, but then they'll say stuff about how, like, you can't be solar and chthonic at the same time.
You can't worship the Earth Mother.
You can't worship the Earth Mother and the Sky Father at the same time. These are contradictory thoughts. That's what people who don't understand theology say. Is that Serapis? I would go so far as to say that he is the most Platonic god, or at least most Platonic historical cult that there ever was, because of that.
Yeah, he synthesizes it beautifully, which brings me to another thing that I'm kind of like mulling over is sort of I think it's sort of unclear to me so far, like where Hades is. Like it's depicted as the underworld, but I think obviously it's a place for souls, immaterial things, where they go. And as we know, the Platonic system places matter as the very lowest or most extended emanation, which makes me think that Hades may be sort of a portion of soul, the world soul, that layer of emanation.
It's not terribly new take. I mean, Pletho himself put Poseidon and Hades and Zeus all as part of a Zeus under the Hypatian thing. I'm not gonna say that I understand Plathonian theology. I'm not a liar, but it is certainly something that has historical precedence, and it's certainly important also to understand that the chthonic, by virtue of being formal, is above the material, and that the term underworld is largely a turn of phrase and should be understood as such rather than something else.
Yeah, exactly. Which is it's just something to sort of consider, that I've definitely had to put some thought into, like, working through, as far as like how do you reconcile the obviously, the mythic imagery of it being beneath your feet with the more theological understanding.
Yeah. It's something I don't think enough people, even Platonists, really think about. Is the chthonic. People usually just, like, they don't want to think about death or dying and whatnot, but I don't think people think about it enough. Now, there does need to be a line drawn somewhere. We don't want to become weirdo Christians plastering skulls all over everything like it's going out of style.
Yeah, and we equally don't want to be neurotic Protestants afraid to even, like, think about the underworld, because there's baggage with it, as far as, like, HE double hockey sticks. Don't even don't even say it and invite it into your waking life.
Yeah, certainly not. Christians certainly do not have a healthy relation with the chthonic.
Mm-hmm. Do they have a healthy relationship with?
You cut out at the very end there. We heard they have a healthy relationship with.
I said, do they have a healthy relationship with anything, though?
Well, yes, that's true, but we're talking chthonic. I mean, if we were to go over everything they didn't have a healthy relationship, we'd be here until the end of time. Mm-hmm. And as we do not leave in linear time, we'd be here forever. Which, that doesn't sound particularly enjoyable.
Well, if you want to talk about maybe the tangible effects of Christians having such a poor relationship with the chthonic, look at ancestor cult and how that was, destroyed, and maybe the effects that must have had on us.
It creates a certain level of rootlessness, simultaneously while also creating this weird obsession with corpses. Like, the fact that they bejewel pieces of dead people will never cease to freak me out.
Yeah, they're relics, and yet they won't pray to their grandfather because he's just a human.
How many people today even know who, like, their great-great-grandfather was?
Probably not.
I don't.
Yeah.
Well, I do.
It's a sad, I think, side effect.
Side effect of, you cut out again at the very end.
With just avoiding the chthonic, I think. Am I right?
Yeah, it's a side effect of not just, but the modern.
Yeah, we're just avoiding
sort of disconnection from genealogy.
Yeah. You're right that it's, like, a very modern thing, and it's not something that, it's not like medieval peasants. They still had it to some degree, and it is a thing that really, like, hit its stride with modernity. But, like, it's sort of a matter of modernity allowing that trend to really just, like, be unleashed and accelerate.
Yeah, definitely continued unabated. It was the whole you can't pray to your ancestors thing, I think that has more to do with the fact that Christians have this weird neuroticism of you cannot say if someone is certainly in heaven or hell, which is ridiculous to me. It's not something they even really follow, to be honest.
Dante sure didn't.
Yeah, and that's, like, kind of the whole point of sainthood, is that the saint has confirmed that, they are in heaven, which also...
Well, the you can't know who's in heaven and hell thing is mostly, like, a Protestant cope for, like, third uncle gets himself killed.
Yeah. Well, no,
you gotta have something. You don't want to tell people, oh, Uncle Bob went to hell. Even though we all know that that's the case. Nobody would say that.
Yeah, but yes. Well, and also part of it definitely has to do with the fact that we have separated people from the divine, as being somehow separate, truly distinct things, which is not true.
Yeah. Yeah, if you separate the divine from humans, then I mean, really, you dehumanize them because a human is a partially divine creature.
Yes, in every myth, it is understood that at some level humans are partially divine, even in the least charitable of human origin myths, like the myth of the Zagrean human origin, being born from the ashes of the Titans and the blood of Zagreus. We're still part of Zagreus.
Yeah.
But also, part vile Titan. Let us curse their bones. Let their bones be ground to dust.
Oh, another topic that fits nicely is the idea of punishing hell.
Yes.
Eternal hell versus like Tartarus as sort of a limited sentence, a purificatory phase.
The gods believe in rehabilitative justice.
Yeah.
An extremely painful.
Get in the pit bull, George. It's a beautiful pit bull.
An extremely painful, unimaginably horrible justice, but it is a reformist one nonetheless. That may see your entire self destroyed.
Yeah. Well, it's almost sort of like it's kind of like a.
They only destroy the bad parts, and if your entire self is destroyed, then the whole thing was bad.
Well, yeah, and it comes down to your point of view, basically, where the proportion in which you suffer is basically just the proportion to which you are attached to the things that are being purified away.
Yeah.
You can choose to not be attached to the little evil bits hanging off of you, and you'll make it through the underworld just fine, and come out the other side as a better soul and a better body, or not reincarnate at all and take up your seat in the spheres.
Yeah, it's one of the things that Siddhartha Gautama was right about. That all your sufferings are ultimately your own fucking fault.
Yeah, which is
stop being so attached, dummy. None of this is real.
yeah, which is, I mean, such an important lesson that is like completely devoid from anything modern people learn, like culturally, and it's especially awful how people are explicitly in rebellion against this idea that you are responsible for your life, even the really uncomfortable parts.
It's all systemic dynamics. We live in a system.
Yeah,
we live in a system. I'm oppressed by the system.
Yeah,
and I'm poor because of the system. I'm depressed because of the system. It has nothing to do with my actual life choices.
They also attach all these things that the system can control. Why does it matter if you're poor? For example,
a very valid point.
Yes.
Yeah, you can still love God no matter what those situations are, and like maybe even they're correct about systems being set up unfavorably or unjustly, but it like the resignation of responsibility is basically just admitting defeat. Where if you said to yourself, okay, well, yeah, this is how the system is. It's not great for me. It's not great for a lot of people. If you just like accept that's how a system is, you just kind of sink. Or you can.
Yeah, it's like if you really believe the world by system, wouldn't you be fighting to change that with everything you have, resigning? Just be like, well, I guess we're just going to complain until everything falls apart and we all die.
Yeah.
But most of these people.
Welcome to the special Bootstraps episode of the E-Politeia,
in which we tell you not to pull you up by your bootstraps, but to pull yourself up by your copy of the complete works of Plato.
Yeah.
By which we mean don't pull yourself.
Get out of the cave and get a goddamn job.
Go out and establish the Politia.
Mhm.
Overthrow your local city government.
Yeah,
Exile
except
everyone over the age of 14.
it's like boomer parents kicking their kids out at 18. We kick every kid out of the Politeia at 18 to go, I don't know, be Ulfhednar for a few years.
Go establish a new Politia.
Yeah.
But yes, this. How do we even get to that? We're talking Chthonic. I mean, I guess the world
we were
is
talking.
Chthonic by nature
Yeah,
of being
yeah.
material. So it is tangentially related, but I would prefer stay focused. Is that back to the Chthonic?
Yeah, well, we were discussing purificatory
Yes.
Hell Tartarus.
Yes, and I mean, that does remind me of the one correct thing that Sartre ever said. Hell is other people.
Very true.
Very true. And it is definitely that attachment that people have to the whole thing that really ultimately caused the pain.
Yeah.
I think it was Socrates, or Plato using Socrates as a Sakvahut, as he did,
Yeah.
who said that a true philosopher can have no misfortune come to him.
Mhm.
That's important.
Yeah.
Important to know.
Yeah, you could also say hell is seeing otherness in yourself and not
Yeah.
recognizing the non-duality.
You can bring that back to your screed you posted in the early morning. I would take that essentially as the theme of that is that you've taken yourself and made an other of it.
Yeah, exactly.
What was it that I said earlier? Yes, they've divorced themselves from themselves and identify with attributes rather than their substance.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is just absolutely disgusting. And
Unfortunately.
definitely chthonic.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, they're in the cave.
I
Chilling.
That's
in
the
cave.
nature of how people relate, how people think of themselves now. The bundle of identity. It's a bundle of disconnected components rather than
Yeah.
sort of what is the core of like what am I here to do?
Yeah,
You know,
which is
sort of like what is my destiny? They don't think about that. It's about sort of all these sort of very superficial identities, and you can go into a million different things.
yeah, you get as much meaning from all that as you do from like taking a quiz of what Hogwarts house you are.
Yeah,
We have Hogwarts house identity politics right now, and it's not good for anybody, but they don't see a way out, and they don't even recognize they're being harmed by it.
There's the two varieties: the internet pool identity politics, and then sports team identity politics, and I can't decide which one's worse.
Yeah, the two genders.
Also, funnily enough, more or less equally falling into conservative and in liberal categories. Fun.
Yeah, well, a maxim that I think everybody should internalize is that conservatives are just slow liberals.
They are retreating liberals.
Yeah.
They are in a
it used to be you could say that like conservatives were what liberals used to be 30 years ago. Now it's not even 10 years ago.
Yeah, for real. Like,
I'd say it was like 6 months at this point.
Yeah.
And I mean, well, that has to do with the fact that generally people should divorce themselves from movements of the moment, as I would say.
mm-hmm.
Movements of the moment. Movements of the moment are definitely chthonic.
Oh yeah.
That's what I'm going to say after every point I make. That is definitely chthonic.
Definitely.
Definitely chthonic.
Very, very Chthonic.
They do bring death, but more of a spiritual death than a real physical. Well,
yeah. You could
more of a real spiritual death than the fake physical kind.
Yeah. Yeah, you could compare it to to the motions of daimones in the Platonic system, where sort of there's this bottom layer of divinity that we access is through divine madness, is like through frenzy, and like we're devoid of frenzies that capture us and harness us and point us upwards, and we're just surrounded by obsessions that are just like in themselves. They're kind of like almost like solar flares that just kind of fly off into nothingness, but they feel like they have a lot of power when they're actually happening, because it's it's a little portion of the sun just going.
I think a lot of people lack the vitality necessary to even participate in a re-estrade, so to say.
Mm-hmm.
Divine madness is actually very chthonic. Not even a joke there.
When we say chthonic, it's not a value judgment like it is for Christians. It's a very like real and important part of the structure of reality that we have a duty to approach correctly in a way that doesn't destroy us.
We have to approach the madness. To bring back to our old talk with Vathek here, like Odin. Odin is a very chthonic god, despite being very Zeus-like. He's also associated very much with that divine madness. Same thing with Dionysus and Lugh to a lesser degree.
Well, I think part of what, since we're going back to that thoughts on it, I think part of what you see with Odin and also Set especially is the idea that sort of the system can only exist through basically confronting and integrating what's outside of the system. Sort of that which rules over the system must necessarily sort of transcend the constructs of that.
Right.
I think that's sort of the idea of divine madness. Actually, order, sort of like a rational cosmos, really can only exist by the sort of underlying power of that actually superseding the reason that's within the cosmos.
Yeah, it's limit metabolizing infinity, or its boundary metabolizing unboundary to produce being.
Yeah, well, I actually talked about this earlier today when I was trying to explain to somebody essentially how Dionysius actually was worshipped. And so he brought up like Bacchanal. That's clearly Dionysus is a god of chaos. But I said no, Bacchanal and Dionysalia and all those other holidays, ostensibly subversive actions, are in truth actually the opposite. They are affirming the order of the day through their subversion,
right?
By acknowledging that this is an unusual event, and the followers of Dionysus were unusual people. They were not supposed to be normal. And by making this clear division between that which is what is lawful and that which is chaotic, and affirming that the chaotic is unusual, you are affirming that the orderly ought to be usual.
Yeah, the exception makes the rule.
Yes. And this is apparently a very difficult concept for some people to understand.
Well, I mean, with so much of what we talk about, people completely start from scratch. It's completely not like taught or even introduced to anybody through normal channels. We're basically in the process of creating, bringing people to old understandings completely from scratch.
De-Christifying the populace at large. Even a lot of sensible polytheists and even Platonists seem to have internalized a lot of Christian notions of the world, that everything must be this flat, uniform, and ultimately boring gray world.
Yeah, or people who have just over internalized Christian images of what polytheism is supposed to be, where they think it's like this absolute just like shit show mess where you just do whatever and it's sanctioned because the gods are morally great or whatever.
Amoral.
Or yeah.
Amoral spiritual force. I think you mean evil. That actually relates to something else I was reading about earlier. I was reading about the cult of Santa Muerte. No doubt
Oh
a
yeah.
demonic cult. I think that kind of goes without saying. And not just because it's spooky looking, but precisely because of how it's described.
Well, yeah, I'm sure you mean daimonic in the Platonic sense. Yeah, it's clearly like a local, some kind of local genius or spirit. Right?
Well, no, I'm asserting that it is evil. It is an evil force. It's clearly some sort of malevolent spirit.
I do not know enough about it, but go on.
I got
what?
I got a blue.
Huh?
You've cut out again, Vathek.
I said I have to plead ignorance on that particular.
Oh, I will talk very briefly about Santa Muerte, which is very Chthonic. It's Santa Muerte is decried by the Catholic Church, understandably, as a demonic and satanic cult. But the specific problems and the actual ones, because we don't give a shit about Jesus, I don't care. Is ultimately that it is described, this holy death is described as being an amoral figure that will grant the will of whoever asks from any position and more or less for whatever purpose. And when I read that, I was thinking, well, amoral, for it seen as neither good nor evil, brings to mind me the thought that, well, that's just evil. If a force is willing to do something that is evil, then it is not good, definitionally.
Yeah.
So, I sit firmly in the camp that we should destroy it. When we take over Mexico, kill the adherents to the man.
It's like,
yeah.
I'm trying to think, like I don't know, the idea that a thing will just grant wishes essentially with no regard for like their content, sort of. I guess the idea would be it's
intent.
based on. I guess the idea. I guess the idea is like it's based on the relationship of the person asking with the figure, and that's kind of the only determining factor. Would that be accurate? It's just kind of like,
you always got to be careful with. I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you, but you always got to be careful when people describe amoral today, because that can mean a whole lot of.
Well, in the context, it was speaking amoral, as in did not care about the intents of the person in question. So
that definitely sounds
would intercede on the behalf of a drug kingpin just as much as like some random peasant.
Well, well, that's how Jesus got popular.
Well, yeah, that's because Yahweh is an evil demon. We've already established that.
Yeah, well, you bring a mass of just like degenerate people unwilling to follow an actually delineated good, and you say, well, here's a spiritual figure, so you have that veneer of like authenticity or legitimacy from it being a religious figure, where you just say it doesn't care about your moral content. And of course the Christians did eventually sort of glaze over and say, okay, well, you have to be good after you devote yourself.
Yeah.
But the idea that like off the bat he'll save anybody no matter what they've done in the past, that doesn't jive with reality.
Well, they definitely have like this idea is that more charity is better, which is just very naive, honestly, overly permissive. It's not something like that you should just help people.
Christianity is true. There's literally, why should not just be a complete degenerate.
Yeah, just feel sorry about it.
There's no reason. No. Like it's really is kind of a illogical system.
It's the act of madness. Madness, I say.
Very chthonic.
Madness is chthonic, as we said. Back to let's pivot. Let's pivot a little into something a little more guided. Let's talk about just generally like death-related activities and more or less how to maintain a healthy relationship with death. Let's start prescribing. I think we've hit that portion of the discussion.
Mm-hmm.
We need to divorce ourselves less from death. And need to think about it, maybe not necessarily more, but less than the surface level.
Yeah.
People definitely need to be reminded often that your death is inevitable. It is so inevitable that you are already dead.
Mm-hmm.
You were born dead.
Yeah, time is flat. You're just experiencing. Right now, you're experiencing a small portion of not deadness that is not that necessarily different from what you experience when you are dead, quote unquote.
Yes, and as a result of this fact that people are born dead, we should stop acting surprised at death. Which in turn, be less obsessed with death. You're not going to avert it. You're not going to slow it down. You will die at your allotted hour. And that's the first step to maintaining a healthy relationship with the big D. Or M, depending on your language.
Yeah.
I would say the next step is to not inculcate yourself from death. Associate with death. Bury your relatives yourself. Don't let some douchebag in a suit do it and overcharge you for it.
Yeah. Yeah, don't fucking like pump them with formaldehyde and put rouge on their cheeks and
Yes.
In the ground on a pyre, have a feast. Say your thanks to them.
You don't even need to do anything particularly special with the body. Just throw it in a ditch if that's what they want. Let the dogs eat it. It doesn't matter. It's a corpse. It is an empty shell.
Well, I think there's probably some sort of like buffer time after death when it probably still matters to the spirit's experience. What goes on.
When it starts to get cold and stiff, that's when you can throw it in the ditch. I'm not advocating you for throwing your father's corpse in a ditch when he dies. Do not do that. But if they ask, just throw my corpse in the ditch, then your father might be Diogenes of Sinope.
Top 10 signs your father might be Diogenes
of Sinope. He lives in a clay jar in the Agora.
He went to the Agora for cigarettes 50 years ago
and now he lives in a clay jar. But I think mourning is definitely important at some level, but it's more of the mourning that they, as a person, will not be able to enact their good upon the world, rather than the fact that they are dead.
Mm-hmm.
And then celebrate.
Yeah, it's the fact that you're not going to see them around.
Yes.
To
do good is to live the moral life and live one of contemplation. And dead people can't exactly do either.
Well, maybe they can contemplate. That seems to be suggested in the Cradulus.
Well, yeah, but I'm just speaking. In
our world,
we should be mourning the fact that they cannot. The world is lesser for their.
They can live a contemplative death, but not a contemplative life. Maybe.
Yes. It's like that is the thing that you should be focusing on when trying to maintain a proper mourning.
Yeah, well, I did read up a little bit in preparation for this stream on Roman practices with their lares and parentes and limores and such. And one thing they did that I think is really very, very good that should be brought back is dead family members. You make a bust for them and you put it in like the most public part of the house where you hold your parties and your gatherings. And the idea is because there's a likeness of them present, their spirit can kind of just come pop in whenever, say hi, and has sort of a seat at the table when you're having family gatherings, you're having parties or feasts.
Yes, I think that's definitely important. I would go so far as to say the ideal familial villa compound thing would have the mausoleum adjacent.
Mm.
You don't want to remove... burying your family members distant from you, I think, is a bad idea. Even the very most ancient Stone Age people understood this and buried their dead underneath their homes.
Mm-hmm.
Which I'm not saying go as far as that.
Yeah,
That restricts your ability to make a basement like that.
And if you have to be nomadic, cremate and carry the ashes.
Or just you place your dead in like a specific location,
Mm-hmm.
and you go back to there, like your summer pastures or whatever. I don't know. Our Scythian audience,
Yeah, let us know, guys, if there's any Scythians out there. How do you deal with your dead?
I guess
Rural Mongolians, famously.
Oh, you cut out again. They famously.
I said rural Mongolians are famously.
You cut out again right at the very end. Keep going from what you said. Famously.
Famously fans.
Oh yes.
The E-Politeia broadcast. Yeah.
Of course.
As we know, you've got a just giant Mongolian audience.
They have their satellite dish on top of their yurts, and they
They're
tune
one
in.
satellite dish amongst their population. A very. But yes, I think don't inculcate yourself from death, and do not fall to grief in mourning. What else is there proper for associating with death? Don't skimp on it. But don't go too far.
Yeah.
It should be a celebration of their life. But it is for the living, and don't be going and doing stuff like the first emperor of Qin did. Don't do that.
Geez, was that the terracotta guy? I'm not up on
Yes, it was the terracotta guy. I'm gonna say it. I'm putting on record. I denounce Qin Shi Huangdi. I'm calling him out.
You disavow?
I disavow. I firmly disavow pretty much everything he did.
Sorry if there's any terracotta warriors in the audience today.
Or any legalists.
We await your response video.
Yeah.
What is this, 2008? Response. But yes, I think ornate tombs, definitely not a great idea. I might like the pyramids to look at. They're very impressive structures. Bad. I think they're quite bad. In
See, I gotta disagree. That I'm biased here, but I have to theologically, in arguments of good taste, I have to disagree. I'm quite a fan of Austin burial ground.
Well, as an Egyptian or as a Kemeticist, that stands to reason.
It'd be weirder if you didn't. I'm of the opinion that such resources and labor should be used for temples.
Yeah, and if you want to be, I don't know, buried in a temple, I think probably ancestral temples are a must.
I think that's a good compromise. The Christians have the right idea of burying people in cathedrals.
Mm-hmm.
That is the singular endorsement I will give them, aside from the papal system.
Yeah, eventually we will be acquiring the graves of Alexander and Thomas Taylor and Pletho and sticking them in a cathedral in a cathedral of the genii.
We will stick them into the newly christened Hagia Sophia, now named
Yeah.
the Hagia Philosophia.
Ah.
We're also going to be throwing the bones of Constantine to the Bosphorus, but that's for the future. I would say desecrating the dead is also a bad idea generally.
Yeah.
It's just very petty. After I
Yeah,
say that
you really.
immediately after saying that I would desecrate the bones of a long dead religious rival.
Yeah, it probably brings more potential for wrath on you than it's worth.
Yeah, it's probably a better idea just to take the bones and reinter them in an unmarked grave.
I don't understand how anybody doubt the sort of efficacy of sort of grave curses,
Oh,
and,
absolutely.
and the power of dead people. If you look into like how much fucking weird stuff happened after they took a taint cut out of Egypt.
Oh
I mean,
yeah,
look,
like they've
just
had a
look
really
at
rough couple years.
Yeah,
look at the status
and
of
it was just
Egypt.
like normal stuff. It was like a lot of really sort of like difficult
Well,
deaths.
there's also
Yeah.
the grave of Tamerlane, which had a curse on it. Whoever opens this shall be attacked by a great conqueror. And then, like 2 days later, they were attacked by Adolf Hitler.
Wow.
And then they reinterred him, and shortly after that, they started to win the war.
Interesting.
Yes, it's
I never knew that.
it is a very interesting fact. Don't fuck with the dead, even if they're not of your religion. I can joke about throwing the bones of Constantine into the Bosphorus, but to do so would be to invite wrath by not just Constantine, but his entire family, even Julian.
It's true. Or whichever furies or underworld spirits the dead are entrusted to.
Yes.
I'd say they're more to be feared than the ghosts themselves.
Just because, we are in a position of power, possibly, it doesn't give us an excuse to not act according to what is right.
Mm-hmm.
Just because, our enemies aren't really adhering to it either. That's the difference between it, not to get into like the conservatard, hypocrisy thing. We'll still destroy them, but we'll do it in a righteous manner. We should never succumb to the same underhanded, evil methods that so many people are willing to pull out.
Mm-hmm.
It also helps to ease the transition by not going around and blowing up cathedrals like it's going out of style.
Right.
This broadcast has gotten a lot more Fed posty than I thought it was going to.
It's
got on, I gotta say.
Fed posting is chthonic. Also, I am not calling for extra legal violence. I am calling for violence of the extremely legal variety. When we come to power, we shall do this in an orderly, lawful manner. I disavow any extra legal violence except done in the specific goal of taking power, as Kaiser said. Don't break the law unless you're going to seize power. And I think that's a pretty good position to have.
It actually circles back to what we were talking about of chthonic madness. Sort of, you're breaking the law, basically.
Yeah.
You're transcending the law to actually.
However, that doesn't mean that we should be, going around and desecrating the bones of some guy's grandpa.
Yeah.
We are not Spanish. I mean, I would say it's probably no coincidence that the fact that the Spanish Republicans not too long after doing that stuff got pretty thoroughly crushed by the conservatives.
Yeah.
The conservatives in the Spanish Civil War did not have the advantage. They had less of the army, less of the government, and fewer. I would like to say that this dog is not chthonic.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. Dogs are pretty chthonic.
No,
I think we might have trick or treaters coming by and some stuff.
This particular dog is not chthonic.
Huh.
Chthonic is quiet.
Yeah.
So yes. Any other things about a healthy association with death? Also, by the way,
practice death by meditating.
Yes, practice death.
Yeah.
I think it's important to sort of keep in perspective how many people died before you, how many other living creatures before you,
Everyone that has lived
and how many will live and die.
All of them.
Yeah.
Literally everyone, and even the universe itself will one day die.
And then another one after that, and another after that.
Every world is born, and every world will die. The gods won't. That's pretty good.
Yeah. That is good.
I mean, it is appropriate that Havamal, written by Odin, of course. I refuse to accept any humorism involved. 100% written by Odin. A lot of it has to do with accepting death and understanding death and not fearing death, most of all.
Mm-hmm.
A coward thinks he'll always live if he keeps himself from strife, but old age leaves no rest nor peace, though the spears have spared his life.
So true.
So you start getting arthritis.
Can we get a so true in the chat for that?
So you start getting arthritis. Start picking fights with people. That is a certified Aloysius advice.
Odin mad online.
Odin was mad online. He was also mad in person. In every variety of the word. Very mad.
Yeah.
Odin is the Fury. Fury Chthonikus.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very chthonic.
Very, very.
I think we pretty much exhausted it all for a relatively on-plan stream.
Yeah, it was about an hour exactly as well.
It was 1 hour and 18 seconds now.
Wow.
So yeah.
Beautiful. Well, happy Halloween and happy Samhain.
Happy Halloween to all, yeah.
Happy Samhain. I hope none of you are eating that garbage sugar slop for your own health. Make some nice globy instead.
Make a nice pastry, some cheesecake.
I said globy.
Yeah.
You know what globy
Make some barley cakes for Demeter.
Dread Persephone. I love the epithet Dread Persephone.
Mm-hmm.
People were terrified of the other in Persephone's name for the longest time. More terrified than Hades.
Yeah, she's definitely been how would you say
Disneyfied?
Softened. She's been softened. She's been softened in the public image.
People are not as scared as Persephone. There's something about the female aspect of the chthonic. Now I brought up another topic. Something about the female aspect of the chthonic that seems to inspire more terror historically. People were definitely much more afraid of Ereshkigal, Hell, Persephone than they were of Hades and whatnot.
Yeah, I think it's because there's like an element of unpredictability or like disorder there. Where I've
been really sort of looking into the Greek papyrus as actually just reading some of the vocations Hecate that are And it just struck me like how much more extreme the language is in those than in any other sort of type of ritual that is in that. So
Yeah. That is something to think about, but I haven't thought about it enough. Actually, that's not right. I've thought about it a lot, actually. The question of the female Chthonic being seen as much more violent and unpredictable, and therefore feared. I've thought about it a lot, but I don't feel like I understand it fully.
There's probably a lot to be said about Kali Ma in that regard. Probably a topic for a whole other stream.
Well, Kali isn't Chthonic. She's Aaronic.
That's true. But I think the association with destruction is probably it's probably something that carries over into why in the West female Chthonic figures.
Yeah, well, Resh Kagal is not really associated with destruction, for example, but was just generally very feared. Shiva is Chthonic though. Very, very much so. I mean, he's basically like a 1-for-1 copy of Dionysius. Except, the whole dying part. But I'm just going to put that down to the fact that the Indians, they just didn't get that part of the myth.
Yeah. Well, what are we at now? An hour and 3 minutes, 4 minutes?
We've gone over, man. We've gone over. We got to cut it off before it gets any worse.
Or else it'll just keep growing and growing like a
tumor.
Like a. I was going to say like a vine. I was going to say a tumor, but a vine would be more appropriate.
Both are very chthonic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've ran out of things to say, but definitely. I think next episode, it should definitely be on comparative with Indian myth.
Yeah.
I think that's a good topic. We should talk.
Yeah, I'll have to read up more on that because I've been reading up on the more abstract side of Vedanta lately,
Yeah.
but I'm not versed enough in sort of the more cultic myth.
If anyone knows
figures.
any Indians who want to talk in context, because otherwise we'd be talking more or less out of our ass for like an hour.
Yeah.
We're like, please, I read this. Did you talk to any like Brahmins? Absolutely not. But I read it. But I think that should be our next topic, if not for doing the whole Sibel defense squad thing that we keep meaning to do.
True.
Well, by we, I mean force Thomas James to do.
Yeah.
Because I'm not really part of the Sibel defense squad. Admittedly, she does still creep me out.
Yeah. Yeah, I find her cult just to be a little bit out of. I suppose her original Anatolian cult, I should say, to be just a little bit out of my wheelhouse / cults that I have particular interest in.
I wouldn't ban it, but I would not patronize.
Yeah.
Would not sacrifice a hectocomb of cattle to.
And I would probably mandate that balls stay attached.
Wait, which ball? Like Baal or ball? I do agree our balls and balls should remain attached to ourselves. That is a pun that makes absolutely no sense.
I mean, I suppose it makes sense if you consider like the Roman custom of saying "my Juno" or "my Jove," where there's sort of an implicit understanding that there's a small instantiation of every god inside of you.
My Baal Haman.
Yeah, my Marduk, my Mardukan ball.
Well, Marduk is Baal Haman, so
it all works out.
That would be like saying my Jupiter and Zeus.
Yeah.
All right, that's enough. We've completely
Yeah,
gone
that's
off,
a
gone
that's
off
a
the
good-
rails.
Y'all have a good
on
night.
the Halloween stream.
We've crashed into a nearby tree.
We've crashed into the walls of Tyr. Alexander is climbing the ladder as we speak.
Everything's in just absolute chaos, which is very chthonic.
Very.
All right, I'm cutting it off now.
All right, bye.
See you.
Good night.
See you all next time.
Happy Halloween.
Peace. Happy Samhain, Samhain.
Happy Samhain.